I'm joined today with my good friend Raymond Song, who's the climate and policy lead at CTrees. Raymond, thanks for coming, man. Good to have you on the podcast finally.
Very excited.
Catching you at COP of all interesting places, and this very busy AIDA business hub on the Monday, the 4th of December. So it's a pleasure to have you.
Yes, very excited. Yeah.
So Raymond, you have one of the most interesting backgrounds. No, and it's not hyperbole. I think you genuinely do. And I regard you not only as one of the most intelligent people in the carbon markets, well, broadly, and I mentioned that to you off camera previous times, but I'd love for the audience to learn about your journey, how you arrived here, because it's fairly unique, and I think it could actually be a really great model for other young people to enter into this marketplace. Give us a bit of background if you can.
Yeah. So really glad to be here. Thanks, Rene, for the invitation. I do have a pretty interesting journey so far. And it started not really directly in carbon markets. So I was born and raised in China. I grew up in Beijing, all my life before coming to the States for school. And then I started caring about climate, I would say probably in my elementary school. It's a pretty cliche start. It started with An Inconvenient Truth, the documentary that Al Gore did. I watched it in my 5th grade.
How old? You were 5th grade. Okay, great. That was also the same moment in Call to Action for me, but I was a lot older.
For everyone, probably half of the people here in the conference, it's like got called to action by that documentary. But back then, as an elementary school student, I don't have the knowledge or the resources to actually do anything here. But fast forward to when I was in junior high school. This is probably 2011.
Okay.
There was something happening. It didn't happen, just like all of a sudden overnight, but it's been around for like the past 10, 20 years. It's the air pollution in Beijing.
Yes.
So that was crazy. It was. I remember it started.
It's literally oppressive.
Yeah.
You get a bad day, and it's like you can't breathe, you can't see. It's intoxicating.
Exactly.
In a bad way.
But the interesting thing is, if you grew up in China, you did not feel that suffocation from air pollution because you kind of got your body kind of get used to it.
Yeah, but that's it's a relativity thing.
Yeah,
right?
it's a relativity thing.
Coming from an outsider's perspective, my first time in Beijing, I noticed that. It was astonishing. And then we got a really beautiful day, and it was like, oh, okay, this is great. Same in Xi'an. And then one day it wasn't great, and it was like, what's going on? Or like, it's like the fumes are like toxic, essentially. So what was that like?
And the interesting thing is, it's actually a perfect metaphor for what's happening here, with climate change. It's like we're literally seeing, the CO2 level going up every single day, every single second, but you don't feel it.
Yes.
It's like the same with, I have visitors coming into China, to Beijing from, all over the world. The second they got here, they started coughing, they're feeling uncomfortable. But growing up in Beijing, we feel like, oh, this is the fog. We're fine.
Natural. Yeah.
So starting to realize that this is not a normal situation was the real wake-up call for me. But
it's like the old adage of like the frog in the boiling pot of water, effectively, right? It's just imperceptible in terms of the increase in temperature until it's too late.
Until it's too late.
And that's a very apt metaphor for what's currently happening. We have a very finite carbon budget, and we're blowing through it really quickly, and we're thinking everything's sweet, but it's not.
So back then I realized that there wasn't really much to do in China, as a youth, and especially as a youth activist. Activism is not the best solution in China. Let's put it
with a central party control. Yes, I think that's very well put.
Yeah, so I got involved in another way, which is advocacy, which is slightly more moderate than activism, and I got involved with an organization called CYCAN.
Okay.
China Youth Climate Action Network is part of the CAN network that's everywhere here at COP. And then they've been sending out youth delegation, to COP every year since 2009, since Copenhagen. And I applied, and I got admitted to that delegate as the first and the youngest, as the first high school student and the youngest back then. But I encountered
with the Chinese delegation at
with the Chinese youth delegation.
Youth delegation. Okay.
But then I encountered a real problem, is that you see many youth activists now around at COP, but then you don't really see them back then in 2015.
Okay.
So the real thing is, back then.
Alexa, come on in.
Yeah.
We're recording.
Go ahead.
It's great. So Alexa Kelly just photobombed us. This is great. So we're just getting some background from Raymond, but
Wonderful.
like we can jump in anytime you want.
Yeah, great.
Do you have a
Raymond,
tight schedule?
Yeah, I bet
no.
you do. You don't? Okay. Well, do you want to just catch your breath for like 5-10?
Yeah.
Could do that. Okay. Cool. So sorry. So Raymond, can you go back and just sort of give a little bit of that background?
Yes, so I was admitted to the Chinese youth delegation as a high school student, as the only high school student. Back in 2015, I was ready to go to Paris for the climate conference.
In 2015?
But I encountered a real problem.
What was that?
Because nowadays you see youth activists all around at COP. But back then,
There was no place for them.
Yeah,
They
weren't a thing.
Yeah.
Because the problem is, back then, if you're an observer to the UFCCC, you could not register anyone under 18.
Oh wow.
And then two months before COP, I realized I couldn't go because I couldn't be registered. They couldn't get me into the system. They put my date of birth in. I didn't go through.
Yeah.
So what I did was one of my high school alumni. She was from the same junior and high school, and then she went to I think Peking University, and then she's working in the Ministry of Environment in China. And then what I did was I wrote a handwritten letter saying that, I'm a youth activist from China. I'm really passionate about climate change. And I addressed it to Mr. Xie Zhenhua, who's the special envoy of climate change.
Wow.
And then she actually transmitted the letter, the handwritten letter. I should have taken a screenshot of it.
should.
I didn't get to keep it. But she sent it actually to Mr. Xie Zhenhua. And 2 days later, I got a badge, party overflow, from the official Chinese
Amazing.
delegation. Yeah.
There you go.
So that's how I got involved with COP in the first place. I was 17. I was in Paris, and then I keep returning every single year because this is.
So how many COPs have you been to since?
I think
6, 7, 8?
I think 8, if I remember correctly. So this is the 8th COP. Yeah, and yeah. So it's been amazing because every year there are like 30, 40,000 people. Nowadays it's like 70, 80,000.
It's growing.
Full of inspiration, full of ideas, full of new things to work on.
I agree with
every
you.
year.
That is a really great observation. I kind of had that this morning. There is such a great kind of momentum that's happening right now. And like you said, there's 70 to 80,000 people. This place is heaving. And maybe not everybody here is well-intentioned. Everyone's got their own agendas and it's a little bit this kind of diffuse. But nonetheless, it's galvanizing action. There's momentum, there's energy, right? In a positive way to help to actually address this issue.
Exactly.
So it's not like there's the early days, which was just this isolated little cohort.
Yeah, it's
now
like
it's actually like a
scattered
call
around
to
the
action.
world.
It's a lot more people. And now the difficulty is essentially how do we focus on the matters at hand to do all of these things, right? Which is difficult, but I think it's been done quite well.
Yeah. So that
optimism is great.
Yeah, that's actually how I got involved in carbon markets in the first place. It's like carbon markets has never been the central theme for me, like from the start, but it has been like tangentially there from the very beginning.
Okay, so what is the core theme then?
So like when I think the core theme was, how do I help with, China's decarbonization?
Okay.
And, back then, when I started, I was part of the Chinese delegation. So naturally I said to them, okay, you did me a big favor. I want to help in any way possible. And they said, oh, why don't you start listening in on these negotiations? The first negotiation I got involved in was Article 6, which was very tough. We've been negotiating that since 2015 or before that, with Alexia Kelly and Kelly Kazir, many amazing negotiators around the world. But it's tough. And when I started getting involved, I realized that, carbon market or carbon pricing more generally, or put a price on carbon, is like, you need that everywhere in the world. From China to India to Brazil to the EU has been doing a great job, but you need that everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And that's how I got involved when I went to Harvard. I was working with Professor Rob Stavins at the Harvard Project on Climate Agreement. So his job is basically to advocate and research on cap and trade programs all over, everywhere in the world. Article 6, EU ETS, and most importantly, China's carbon market. So that's how I got involved in carbon markets in the first place from the compliance side.
Awesome. See, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that your background is really fascinating. So you come in as a youth delegate, effectively, then you come in as one of the youngest observers, essentially, of these negotiations. You're working with and learning from one of the biggest economies in the world, which is China, which is taking this thing very seriously and actually has policies in place to decarbonize. The Chinese ETS is enormous and potential. Obviously, they've been very deliberate around how they deploy it, and they've been very pragmatic around that, which is not surprising. And now, then you go to the United States, you kind of, just inserted that in. Then you went to Harvard, you studied. Then take me through your journey after you finished your university studies.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned that China, as well as the other parts of the world, like everyone has been very deliberate and cautious about carbon market because, as we've seen in the UETS, there's been a crash, after 2010, with the price of UETS, and it shows that, getting carbon pricing or getting carbon market right is not easy. No, and that's been part of the problem.
But they're really great lessons, and the Chinese delegations have been many and been deep. And and to the testament of the EU relationships with China, in this case, there was a lot of capacity building. AIDA played a really key role in that. They brought in a number of experts talking about voluntary markets, compliance systems like the EU ETS, CORSIA, capacity building. There was a lot of effectively dialogue between various different parties, so the lessons could be applied, and the same mistakes will not then be repeated. Right?
Exactly.
Very important.
I think the real challenge right now is that we can afford some mistakes in 2005.
But that's what happens in innovation.
Yeah,
right? If you look at it from startups, there's always you're making it up while you go along. It's trial and error.
Yeah.
And innovation is that's the journey, right?
But the thing is, with compliance market, you got these huge policy, ministries and policy institutes that's involved. But you've got the scale.
Yeah.
But then what about the speed, right?
What about?
So that's what I've been thinking after college is that with Article 6 and with some of these carbon pricing schemes, we've been developing that for 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. But it's very hard to get it right, and we don't have a lot of room for us until 2050 to get it right and wrong.
No,
so
the clock is ticking.
Yeah. So what we can do is actually leveraging voluntary initiative to get it right and use it as a blueprint to then scale compliance market. So that's why I joined RMI to build out the carbon market initiative to try to get the voluntary market up and going and get it right and use it as kind of the predecessor or the kind of the foundation for more compliance schemes to follow.
Okay, great. And then you finish up at RMI, and now you're at CTrees.
Yeah.
So what are you working on right now that is essentially helping to build further foundational elements in the market?
So it was really interesting. We've got Alexia, a few minutes ago, and then that was actually the first opportunity I got at RMI. It was to work on digital MRV on carbon markets for the ICBCM. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who don't know, digital MRV is measurement or monitoring, reporting, and verification. Basically, trying to see if these credits have real impact or not. And that's for the ICBCM, the Integrity Council Voluntary Carbon Market, is an industry-wide initiative to build confidence and integrity for the voluntary initiatives. And I was looking at these technologies, and one of them is from CTrees. It's a research initiative, with a group of amazing NASA JPL scientists and backed by major philanthropies like Grantham and High Tide Foundation to basically operationalize 20, 30 years of scientific research and then put it into good use to look at what's happening with our forests, what's happening with blue carbon, what's happening with basically nature-based solutions all around the world, from the tropical rainforest in Brazil all the way to blue carbon in Pakistan to peatland in UK. You can look at it from the satellites everywhere around the world.
Great, and bring more confidence.
Exactly.
Based on the data.
That's the data, the transparency, the confidence, and then the accountability, of course.
Fantastic. All right. So, the parting message. What are you hopeful for? Just broadly, what are you hopeful for, Raymond?
I think more specifically for COP this year is to, see how voluntary carbon market has been perceived by the broader climate community, because we've seen some challenges and some confidence and some new initiatives going on, but this initiative is only one segment of the broader climate scheme. So how do we make sure that it's well received and it has maximum impact with the broader climate community? I think that's one small hope for COP, but more broadly on kind of what I'm doing. Is just as you said, I'm 24, 25. I've got time to trial and error, and that's been true. I've been making a lot of mistakes in my career so far, and learning from constantly learning from everyone around me.
Raymond, you're
And
so
that's
much
been-
further ahead. I'm nodding my head in disagreement completely.
And I think that's what I've been trying to do. It's like,
If you had seen me at 24, come on.
it's try to, make mistakes, learn from them, and make new mistakes and learn from them. But one
That's it.
day,
That's
get
growth.
it right with everyone around me in carbon
I'm very
markets.
hopeful, Raymond, because there's people like you in the world, and effectively, we talked about this last night as well. That there's not only are you have this amazing journey and you've got this really bright future ahead, you're recognized as a really powerful voice already in our market at such a young age, but you recognize that you need to pay it forward to younger people. So I want to unpack that with you later on as well.
Yeah, it's always about the future
Yeah,
generations.
it's fantastic. Raymond, it's a pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
I really
much.
appreciate it, buddy.